Okay, good evening and welcome to the August 23rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Township of Montclair Planning Board. In accordance with the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and by sending a copy to the newspaper designated by the township for notices. Electronic notice of this meeting has also been provided by posting a copy of the meeting notice along with the meeting access instructions to the township website and to the main access door of the municipal building. This meeting is being broadcast live on channel 34 and is streaming live and will be available on demand on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and we're obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis of an official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Members of the public are automatically placed on mute until such time that the meeting is open for public questions or comments. At that time, members of the public will be unmuted and they may provide verbal questions or comments as appropriate. Once unmuted, members of the public using the Cisco WebEx platform will need to use the Connect Audio button on their screen to connect to their microphone prior to speaking. Members of the public may also direct questions or comments to Ms. Talley, the board secretary, via the chat or the question and answer functions of this meeting platform, or if all of that fails, by emailing her at jtalley, which is JTALLEY, at montclairusa.org. As to the order of the evening, each application hearing begins with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the variances that are required, if any. We then hear from any expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain the application and why variances are required. Board members may then ask questions of the applicant, the attorney, and their expert witnesses. If you are a member of the interested public but not a witness in the case, you will have 2 opportunities to speak. At the end of each witness's testimony, you'll be given the opportunity to ask the witness questions about his or her testimony. And that's not the time to tell the board what you think of the application. That'll come later. To ask questions, once members of the public are unmuted, let us know you would like to ask a question, and when called upon, give us your name and address, and then ask your questions related to the witness's testimony only. After the applicant's witnesses and the objector or objector witnesses have been heard, members of the audience will have their second opportunity to step forward. And at that time, you may express your opinions, positive or negative, about the application. Comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person. And after the completion of the objector's case, the applicant's case, the objector's case, and public comment, the public hearing is closed, and the board members discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to our discussion, but you will not be able to participate. And after that, first on the agenda is the roll call.
Okay. Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Cook. I think you have to unmute yourself.
I did. Here.
Okay. Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally.
Here.
Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Counselor Schlager.
Here.
Mayor Spiller.
Present.
Ms. Willis is excused. Chair Wynn.
Here.
And Mr. Jacobson.
Were you calling me? I didn't, you broke up.
Yeah.
You were calling me, I'm here.
Yes, okay, okay. All right.
Great. I will turn it back to Chair Wynn.
All right. Thank you, Keith. Next on our minutes, next on our agenda, are the approval of our minutes.
Which I apologize, I did not get a chance to submit the minutes, so we'll have to postpone them for the next meeting.
All right. Then that brings us to the application for Total Image Solutions, 115 Bloomfield Avenue.
Okay. Mr. Berkowitz, I'm going to make you a panelist. So so now you are unmuted and you can initiate your video. I believe you're here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, I unmuted and I'm starting my video.
Okay.
Oh boy, that's the wrong angle. How about that? Okay, I apologize. I have a camera over there and it's for some reason, this is insisting on using the camera on my laptop. So I will change things up. And I also have to apologize. I thought my client was going to be here on this call, but apparently she's not. I can only say that the application has been made to the board, and we are seeking a variance to install a new internally illuminated canopy sign on a property located at 115 Bloomfield Avenue in Montclair, New Jersey. The property is in the Eastern Gateway redevelopment plan.
Mr. Berkowitz,
Yes,
can you hear me, sir?
I can. Yes.
This is Arthur Neese. I'm the attorney for the board. I'm not sure in what capacity you are here, sir, and I'd like to just clarify that for the record.
I apologize. My name is Stephen Berkowitz. I'm an attorney at law in New Jersey. I'm here on behalf of Total Image Solutions, LLC.
So you're an attorney for the applicant, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your client is not here to testify?
I was under the impression that they were going to be here.
Mr. Berkowitz, don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to make sure the record is clear.
Yes, sir, you are correct.
Yeah. You can certainly discuss what it is that your client is attempting to do on the application, but I'm not sure that you can offer factual testimony at this point.
Sir, from a legal perspective, I have to agree with you. I'm not sure why they're not here. My understanding is Mackenzie Smith, who made the application, was going to be here. So
Can I make a suggestion, perhaps? I don't know how the board will feel about this. Why don't we put you on the back burner, and the board can deal with some of its other matters, and perhaps your clients will appear, or you'll have an opportunity to ask them to appear. That's up to the board.
Sounds like a wonderful idea.
Yeah, Mr. Berkowitz, I was going to suggest, why don't you try reaching out to your client and let us know what's going
I
on,
will try again.
and we certainly give you that opportunity.
Thank you. I'll go back on mute.
Okay.
So do we have any committee reports?
Yeah, let me just take Mr. Berkowitz off of the panelist for now. We don't have a committee. We have 2 council referrals to address this evening. So let me pull up those documents. The first one on our agenda is Council Resolution R21-146, which is a resolution. Let's see. This was a resolution from the council requesting the planning board to evaluate 268 Bellevue Avenue. That's the Bellevue Theater in Upper Montclair, to determine if it meets the criteria for an area in need of rehabilitation. You can see this was a July 13th resolution from the council, which I believe I did distribute previously. In response to that, I reached out to the Director of Utilities to determine, well, let me start with what is an area in need of rehabilitation, because we have some new board members here. We have designated areas in need of rehabilitation before. The difference between an area in need of rehabilitation and an area in need of redevelopment is, number one, the criteria for designating an area in need of rehabilitation is much lighter than an area in need of redevelopment. Once a property is designated an area in need of rehabilitation, the township does have the ability to adopt a redevelopment plan for that property. The only difference is the township doesn't have the ability to acquire it through eminent domain. That's off the table. And the township does not have the ability to enter into a pilot agreement with the property owner. That's only reserved for areas in need of redevelopment. The township is able to do what's called not a payment in lieu, it's called a tax abatement, but really what it is not abatement, it's a phased in approach to paying the increase in taxes. It's a short-term tax abatement. So the increase, if the township so decides with an area in need of rehabilitation, they can phase in the increased value of the property and the taxes that they pay over a 5-year period. So that gives the township and the property owner a little bit more flexibility in terms of addressing the increased value. So the council, back on July 13th, introduced this resolution to ask the planning board to determine if this property meets an area in need of rehabilitation. What determines what are the criteria for an area in need of rehabilitation are determined or listed in the local redevelopment and housing law. And those conditions that may apply for determination are listed on my memo here. One, a significant portion of structures therein are in a deteriorated or substandard condition. More than half of the housing stock in the delineated area is at least 50 years old. There's a pattern of vacancy, abandonment, or underutilization of properties. 4, there is a persistent arrearage of property tax payments. 5, there's environmental contamination that is discouraging improvements and investment in the properties. And 6, the majority of the water and sewer infrastructure in the area is at least 50 years old and is in need of repair or substantial maintenance. The criteria that really applies to this property, to the Bellevue Theater, would be number 6, because it is one of our oldest buildings in Upper Montclair. So I reached out to the Director of Utilities, Mr. Gary Abzarni, to get information on the condition of the utilities that are serving that area of town. And he issued a report, which is attached here. He indicated that this area, the Bellevue Theater, was built in the late 19th century, early 20th century. The water system that serves that property was originally established in the late 1890s and built upon with large construction done in the 1930s and 40s. The area in question had its sewer lines installed in the 1930s, with the sewer having cure-in-place improvements completed in the early 2000s. That being said, the sewer pipes supporting that line are in need of refurbishment. The water records indicate that the area had water in the timeline of 1913, and only lead service and hydrant replacements were completed in the area. Having the train tracks nearby, changing the water mains underneath the New Jersey transit tracks should be done, and including this property before any leaks or failures occur. So that's the report that was given to me by the Director of Utilities. Clearly, it's more than 50 years old. Clearly, that the utilities do need improvements.
Can I ask my two newbie questions?
Sure.
Newbie question, and they're related. Newbie question number 1 is, does the fact that condition number 6 is met mean that the designation as an area in need of rehabilitation follows automatically, or is there discretion involved? And 2, if because of number 6 we determine this to be an area in need of rehabilitation, what consequences flow from that?
Well, you don't make the determination. It's the council that makes the determination. You give what you do as the planning board is you give your recommendation. So, and it's the council that that adopts the ordinances that actually do the designation. So essentially, it's not automatic. You know, there is some value judgment that board members and the council must make before making the ultimate decision.
And then for the second part of his question, Janice?
Okay,
and
Jeff,
as to
Jeff,
if we
Yeah,
de-
the
if we do designate
consequences
it-
that flow if it becomes an area in need of rehabilitation.
what did you
What
say?
can the township do and what can the developer do that they could not otherwise?
Well, okay, you have the ability to prepare a redevelopment plan for the property. This property is in the NC zone and is not a permitted use. So I think that what the township would like to do is prepare a redevelopment plan for the Bellevue Theater, making it a plan for that property, so it would be a permitted use and with appropriate standards and design requirements reflecting its history. Keeping it before the planning board, because right now any application involving that theater has to go to the Board of Adjustment because it's not a permitted use. So I think there was a consensus that from the council that they really would like to go the redevelopment route for this property and that it does meet the criteria because they believe because of the age of the infrastructure.
So what would happen is that if the council designates it an area in need of redevelopment, it would then come back to the planning board to dig into the work of creating a redevelopment plan.
Well, okay, 2 points. It's not going to be an area in need of redevelopment. It'll be an area in need of rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation, I'm sorry.
And
That's a significant.
the council can decide who prepares the redevelopment plan. And it's not clear to me. The council can take the lead on it, or they can ask the planning board to take the lead on it. I don't think it's going to be a very complicated redevelopment plan, and I anticipate working, whoever is taking the lead on it would reach out to the Historic Preservation Commission to make sure that the historic assets are preserved. But that hasn't been made clear. You know, who's going to prepare the redevelopment plan? This is the first step. But the next step would be somebody, either the council or the planning board, would do the redevelopment plan.
Thank you. I consider myself reasonably educated about, I think I now understand what's clear and what's not clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Janice, do you know whether or not the council dealt with the issue of spot zoning for this singular property?
No, I think because the property is a fairly significant piece of property in terms of its, you know, size, height, history, I'm not concerned about using redevelopment for this specific piece of property would be spot zoning. We've done it for other significant properties in the past, in the township, Academy Square, a couple of others that we've done in the past. And so I don't think that in this instance, by targeting, you know, a larger property in Upper Montclair would be considered spot zoning. Now, if we were going to create a zone district just for this property, you know, there might be an argument, but this is a redevelopment plan, which is a little bit different.
Rehabilitation.
It's an area in need of rehabilitation, but it will be a redevelopment plan.
I have a question.
Yes.
So it's currently a theater per se, although
Right.
it is closed. Can the new plan, whether the planning board does it or the council, can it be undone as a theater? Or doesn't always have to be a theater?
That would be determined in the redevelopment plan. And most redevelopment plans have some flexibility. But it would make a theater clearly would be a permitted use. And I think it would keep this application before the planning board rather than the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
Just so you know, I know the property owner had filed a plan. They wanted to add some within the existing walls of the building without any increase. They wanted to change the uses, add some residential on the upper floors, provide more retail on the first floor. So they do want to, the current owners do want to invest in the theater, and I know that they want to reopen the theater as quickly as possible. I think the council really wants to work with them on this and assist them by writing a plan that I think will work, that will create appropriate standards for development rather than send it to the zoning board of adjustment for a use variance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
There's really no area, it seems to me, I haven't analyzed it, but there's no area for any increase in size of the building. The bulk setbacks are what they are, and we can't really do anything with it.
Previously, they did have site plan approval from the Board of Adjustment to increase the height. Previously, now that application that was granted approval and then the applicant withdrew. So that was a couple of years ago that they went in and they had to get a height use variance because they increased the height and added more theater space in the back. So you can always go up. But the present owners don't want to go up. They want to work within the confines of the building. At least last time I talked.
Ever since I first read about this in the local papers, I've just kind of been trying to figure out what the object of the game is. What are we trying to solve for? I mean, on the one hand, you know, if you asked me 2 years ago, should we have a really nice movie theater in Montclair? You know, I've been going to the Bellevue since I was a kid. I would have said absolutely. Whether the movie business is going to be a theater business 2 years from now, who knows? But I'm not the owner of this theater, and if they want to invest in it and have a really great theater in Montclair and try to make a go of it, fantastic. But there is a little bit of a Trojan horse aspect of this it's like, okay, if we designate this, what's kind of the worst case scenario that this could end up becoming, that we're greenlighting here without really knowing what's the object of the game?
I think that all depends on how what's included in the redevelopment plan. Typically, it's not a single. It won't be a single use plan. So the uses that are permitted in the NC district would still be permitted in the redevelopment plan. We would allow the theater because it's historically been used as a theater and make that a permitted use. So at the end of the day, I don't think that there's a real downside to it, to this project. I think the upside is keeping it as making it a permitted use through the redevelopment process and being able to put in standards to ensure that the historic aspects of that theater are maintained.
I am very interested in hearing the comments of my learned colleagues, because that sounds right, but oh, come on, John, bail me out.
Well, I happen to agree with Janice. I don't think that there is too much risk in terms of, because we're in a neighborhood commercial zone as it is, I don't think that we would create anything that either the council or the planning board would consider creating anything that would deviate from that neighborhood commercial zone without incurring the wrath of the neighborhood. And we've explored other uses in that area through the master plan, and we know that the neighborhood, the people who live there, and the business owners, have some very definite opinions about how they want the area to be, and with the theater as a non-permitted use, it does somewhat limit their ability to gain some flexibility for the property, which I would think that they would want in light of the very thing that you raised about the questionable future of movie theaters, given how things have evolved over the past year and a half. So making it a permitted use, certainly it's been there forever. It's always been there since I've been around for the past 60 some odd years. So I think it's an ingrained part of the Upper Montclair landscape, and I have no problem with it remaining a theater. And I don't have a problem with it expanding the use in something that makes sense, so that you might add a retail component or a residential component to it.
I have a quick question. It's a legal question. The 6 criteria, I'm looking at the local redevelopment housing law now, 48:12A-14. I see 3 criteria. I don't see 6. And then, so that's question number 1. And then if it's based on utilities only, the whole town has bad utilities. So I just need some context in terms of what is, distinct about the criteria that was used
All right.
when we're leaning on just utilities.
Did you look at section 12A14?
Yeah.
Okay, because there are 6. I don't know if you have the most recent version of the local housing and
That could be it. That could be it. I'm sorry. Yeah,
this is,
okay.
I took it straight out of the statute. And
Okay.
we've done, this is not anything new. I mean, we've done this
Okay,
before.
that's fine. But then I probably have an old copy. Well, then I guess the only question then is, is that one hook enough? Just that, because that could be like any place really. But I suppose that's, by extension, you can declare pretty much any place in Montclair an area in need of rehab.
You probably can. If the utilities are in need of improvement.
Mhm.
You have to remember the power, but by designating an area in need of rehabilitation, you're not giving the township a lot of power. Eminent domain.
Oh, yeah, that's not my question though. No, that's not my question.
And a pilot is off the table, so it's
Yeah,
not
no,
a difficult process.
that's not my question was just if that's enough, it's enough. I guess that's if we don't really have a planner's opinion here. We have a memo from the utilities guy, right? You'd have but whatever. I guess
My
just
report, and I am a
what?
licensed planner. You do have my report.
Okay, so we can rely on in the same way.
Yeah, I'm a licensed
Okay.
professional planner, and
Okay,
I've
so
just
then
worked many times.
okay.
And this is not a local Montclair statute exactly. This is pretty much statewide law. So it's not something that we have just made up to suit our purposes here in Montclair. These same principles are used throughout the state.
Okay, that's good.
But I would just like to tag along with what Tony was saying as well. I mean, it strikes me that if you look, and it doesn't really pertain to this particular site, but because we're having the conversation in general, it strikes me that number 2, where it says more than half of the housing stock in the delineated area is at least 50 years old. I mean, that's Montclair. Most of our housing stock is over 50 years old. So couldn't any area that we want?
Absolutely. An entire municipality can be declared an area in need of rehabilitation, and it has been done before.
Yeah. So it strikes me there's a purpose for this that's kind of targeted at this area. And is it to encourage the development because we're giving them a tax break? So if that's the deal, let's just say it.
I think the whole idea is we want to prepare a redevelopment plan for this particular piece of property because of the reasons stated previously.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't, Carmel, you would not have, say, the main drag of Montclair on Bloomfield Avenue, even though most of the buildings here are over 50 years. You wouldn't say that would be an area in need of rehabilitation because you have a thriving, ongoing businesses. Likewise, many of the neighborhoods that you have, you've got, people are maintaining their homes. There's really not a need for rehabilitation. This is only, this is focusing on properties where they have fallen into either non-use or other maintenance issues, and to be able to give the property owners a tool to make it easier for them to redevelop. And it also gives the town a tool while facilitating that to put some controls in place to create a better operating plan, if you will, a better land use plan for a particular area so that the development has some boundaries. It's not the same as it would be if we were doing redevelopment, full-blown redevelopment, but it does afford the township a certain amount of benefit. And it's a tool that is used throughout the state to facilitate proper development. And one of the tools or the aspects of it that make it an incentive for development is the fact that the developer can invest some more money because they're going to have 5 years where they're not going to be hit with a brand new full-blown 100% tax bill, that it's going to be phased in. So that allows them some time to recover, to be able to afford paying the full-blown tax once it's developed and the value of the land is increased.
I think the council recognizes that particularly theaters are going through a really tough time, and whatever they have in whatever the town can do to make this a successful theater, they want to help, they want to assist. And if it's preparing a redevelopment plan that is crafted to make this property work, I think that's what they want to offer. In addition to the 5-year, the short-term tax abatement, the 5-year tax abatement.
And whatever the township puts together, I mean, there's no guarantee that the developer, you know, will 100% go along with it. You know, it's not like the developer gets any sort of, you know,
Right.
driver's seat control. You know, this is a you know, municipal effort to set some boundaries that will allow, better allow some more flexibility in development within parameters.
Okay. But I mean, just by the way, if you look, because you mentioned it, John, if you look at the series of little stores where the office was, so that strikes me, there's a bunch of vacant properties there. Why, for example, would that not be considered an area in need of rehabilitation?
To be honest with you, I don't know, since those stores are the ones you're talking about, the new development, the new building that was put?
No, where the office restaurant was, that's closed down, and there's a string of little.
Those are actually owned by one property owner, and he is requesting a redevelopment plan. So that's a separate initiative that's going on, and discussions at the council level.
So it's happening already. Yeah, okay, thank
Those
you.
discussions are happening, yes. They just haven't progressed at the same rate as this particular one.
No, I feel like sometimes we operate in a vacuum here, not really knowing what's going on in other areas. And it's good to have some perspective of the entire town to help us shape our decisions and have guidance given to us. Thank you.
Oh, Carmel, you want to be fully informed. Shame on you.
Say, because you know our name is a planning board, but sometimes I feel like we are a reactionary board. We don't do a whole lot of planning, in my view. But
Are there any other comments from board members? Is there a motion to recommend that it be designated?
Also
I
move.
would recommend it. I'll second it then.
Oops.
Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call. Vice Chair Boda.
Can I before that?
Okay.
Is there? Sorry. And I'm not saying, I don't know if there's consensus for this, but would we include that because Janice, I'm just picking up on your comment earlier that there's no, you know, the council could take it themselves or they could give it to us. Should we include in the motion a suggestion that it be given to us? If there's not a consensus for that, I don't feel strongly about it, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I would agree with that.
Okay, I mean, you can certainly make the recommendation.
Yeah, it's up to them, but I don't know whether we wanted to recommend it or not.
Yeah.
I personally don't have a problem with including that request in with our recommendation.
Okay. Okay.
I think the council would appreciate us being willing to do the work.
I think the council would appreciate having the option and, you know, seeing that we're willing to take it. I think that there's some reason for us to take it.
Okay, are there any other changes or additions to this recommendation? All right. Vice Chair Broda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Mr. Ian Wally,
Yes.
Ms. Lockman,
Yes,
Counselor Schlager.
Well, my question is, can the mayor and I vote?
You can, well, Arthur, you think that they should abstain since this is a referral from the council?
Yeah, I do, actually. Thank
Okay.
you, Ronnie.
Okay, then I will abstain.
And I'm sure Mayor Spiller will abstain as well, correct?
I will in this instance, yes, abstain.
Okay, Chair Wynn,
Yes.
and Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Okay. I believe Mr. Berkowitz is still here. He sent me a message saying that he was not able to get his client to attend. She's having technical difficulties. And they've requested that the application for their signage at 115 Bloomfield Avenue be carried to the next meeting, which is September 13th.
I don't think we should object to it, you know, in this age of technical marvels, we've all had our shares of malfunctions. And her attorney was here. So, you know, I think that we should go along and give them the benefit of the doubt and let them carry it to the next meeting.
Mr. Berkowitz, I've
Do we have
unmuted
any
you.
time limit issues, Janice?
I think so. I think he needs to do an extension because this has been going on for a while. Mr. Berkowitz, I've unmuted you, I think. So if you does September 13th work for you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, good. Let me check my calendar, and September 13th is a Monday.
I can't hear him. Can you speak up, Mr. Berkowitz?
Yes, September 13th works for me, but if the panel would be so gracious as to give us an extension, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Actually, you have to grant us, Mr. Berkowitz, you have to grant us an extension of time.
Excuse me?
We're asking you to give, because we have a limited time that we need to, we have 120 days from this, from when your application is deemed complete to make a decision. I think by that time it might have passed, so you need to give us an extension of time to make a decision.
Yes, I grant you an extension of time to September 13th. Thank you very much.
I guess we will not require notice, Janice, because we'll make the announcement now.
Right. The notice was complete for tonight's hearing. So we'll see you on September 13th.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you very much.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
I'll leave.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is another council referral to change the parking ordinance. And pull that up. And this was an ordinance that was introduced by the council on August 10th. The planning board has 35 days to review the recommendation to determine if it's consistent with the master plan. And essentially what this ordinance recommends is it eliminates the exceptions to properties in the C1 and the C3 zones in the downtown, allowing them to not have to provide parking when there's a change of use to a more parking intensive use. And it also eliminates the one-time 15% expansion of a building without triggering a parking requirement. So my report went through the history of the parking exceptions that we've had in Montclair, which really dates back to the 70s when it was initially created to try and induce adaptive reuse of our buildings and revitalization of the downtown. Montclair was much different in the 70s and the 80s for those of you who remember it. Over the time since the 70s and 80s, this ordinance has been changed and altered slightly. At one point, it was rescinded or eliminated, and then it was put back in place because, as you know, many of the buildings in the downtown simply don't have parking on their property. But at this point, we know that developers are being very creative in how they can develop their properties within and provide some parking on their properties, or and other ones take advantage of this one-time exemption. So that's why when I reviewed this for consistency with the master plan, that's why I went through the history here. I did note in the last paragraph of my memo that relaxation of the parking requirement has led to the revitalization over the past 40 years may be appropriate because we have seen an unprecedented amount of development in our downtown. Yes, it has been planned, I think very carefully planned with our redevelopment plans. But there's always those outliers where properties are intensified, and it creates, I think, additional parking demands on our downtown area, and has led to parking issues. The biggest problem with the current language is that it allows uses that require a significant amount of parking to locate in existing buildings without having to do anything to address the need for parking, for additional parking. And we've seen this was a problem with properties like the Crosby, where you go from a gas station to a bar restaurant, and the same thing at 6 Gates, where you went from a moving and storage warehousing building to an office building. Those are just two examples that, as you know, I think create some situations where there is a concern with parking. And that's what I believe led the council to introduce this ordinance, not only to eliminate that exemption of parking, but also address mechanical parking stackers, which we had never seen before. And I think there's a concern that it's going to change what Montclair is like, what Montclair looks like and how it operates, is particularly if we have these stackers in our surface lots. So that's why this ordinance was introduced, and you have 35 days to make a comment. The 35 days expires on September, the day after, I think, the planning board meeting, or the day after. So there's a time issue with making comment on this.
I would offer that I think since this has been a repeated issue for us, that I'm in favor of the council's eliminations. And let's see if we can find other ways to deal with the issues that will be more in line with the township's interests.
I would like to run, not walk, to second that that suggestion. I am very grateful to Mayor Spiller, Deputy Mayor Herlock for proposing and seconding this, and to the council for voting for it. And I could not be happier to see this before us.
But can I ask a question? Isn't there more to it than what you've just described? What you're describing is dealing with article, the number 2, but what about the A in the PEDU ordinance, where it says surface parking and parking decks of up to 2 stories in height, and the issue of provided that they serve the C1 permitted uses, you're taking that out. So surface parking and parking decks, they can serve things like medical office uses, municipal government uses, residential uses, where formerly
they have to serve. This is in the accessory uses in the C1 zone. They have to be accessory to the principal use. So right. Whatever the application is that's on that property, that parking on site has to serve that property. That use.
Certain principal uses are allowed in the C1 district, and they don't include municipal government buildings, residential buildings. The other
no, those are permitted uses.
if you go to, I mean, I looked at it, there's another designation, it's called the Central Business Area, Community Area, which is a different color in your zoning map. So
Right, that's the difference is that in the community area, you can have offices on the first floor. You can't have them on the first floor in the center area.
You can also have apartment buildings.
Yes, but you can have apartment buildings above the first floor in the center area. And
Right.
all of this has to do with, those are all principal uses, you know, these parking, surface parking and parking decks are accessory to the principal use on a property. This is superfluous language, provided that they serve uses expressly permitted in the C1 business zone. You don't even need that. The surface parking and the parking deck on a particular piece of property has to be accessory to the principal use on that property. That's what we're trying to say. You're not building a parking deck to serve a private parking deck to serve other uses throughout the district. It's accessory to the use on that property.
Just theoretically, if someone did want to build a parking garage, that would solve a lot of parking problems. So I mean, is building a parking garage bad?
And that would be a principal use. They'd have to come in as a principal use.
As a principal use, okay.
Right.
All right. I have some just general comments about this. I think that, actually just a couple of questions first. Suppose you had, this eliminates the 15% growth of the building. Let's say the building doesn't grow at all, and you have a building that had retail on the first floor, and you had, just general retail, but then someone wanted to put a restaurant in. Now, a restaurant theoretically is a higher demand parking use. Does that mean for every former retail store, if you turn that retail store into a restaurant because it is a higher demand, that restaurant owner or space owner would have to would not be allowed under this? Because that's
they would have to get a parking variance from the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
Have to get a variance.
And then let's say you had a building that was the same thing, some kind of retail on the first floor. Upstairs, you had offices. If someone converted the upstairs to apartments, that would be okay because apartments are a lower designation. But if the apartments upstairs, you couldn't convert that to offices.
Right, because it has a kind of parking use.
So it's also intertwined. Okay, so let me just address it from the standpoint of shared parking. And I'm not behind the scenes. I think this train is pretty much out of the station now in terms of what the council wants to do, which is great. They can do this. But, what we've done is we've suburbanized downtown to the extent that we've got, this puts back suburban standards back into a downtown, which really don't fit. And I think the magic of what we have is that we've got this downtown. And if we deploy parking requirements that are essentially for the suburbs and downtown, I think it could stall redevelopment. And I'm not saying there isn't parking problems. The way you solve that is to judicially go about and create shared parking opportunities. And developers will, I was a developer for 25 years with big companies that did, projects in Montclair without encouragement from the town to actively promote shared parking where there are vacant spaces. And the classic is mixing residential with office. So for example, there's a big redevelopment plan going across the street from Gates, Lackawanna. What could be written into that redevelopment plan is a requirement to provide community parking as a part of the redevelopment plan, which would be shared parking, which would solve a lot of problems in parking in the general area that people are concerned about. So I think that the wise use of redevelopment plans, and we've had a lot. The Wellmont, for example, the Wellmont took all sorts of surface parking that was Montclair parking. And we created, I think the number, because I don't have all the data, but I think we created 130 net new parking spaces in the new garage that's on Glenridge Avenue. I think that's kind of the number. So I'm not exactly sure if that's right, but I think that there was a net add of 30. So all I'm saying is that before this, I think this is a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, and I think the council is well advised to do this based on what constituents are saying about parking. But I think, from a planning standpoint, I think that we need to do a lot more in terms of promoting and really figuring out how to use time of day parking and shared parking for the betterment of all of downtown. And what I said about Lackawanna, who's ever working on that redevelopment plan now, that's a real opportunity to mandate that those residences that will be there, when those apartment dwellers drive to wherever they're going, there's lots of space available in that building for office use. A lot of developers don't want to do it because it's a hassle, quite frankly. No one wants to have, but it's not that hard to do. And I think it could be easily overcome if it's negotiated for upfront. And that's all I have to say.
And to me,
I don't,
I agree with you, and I think we've done it successfully in many of our redevelopment plans. Just Jeff, let me just comment. And I think our redevelopment plans have been really, really successful, particularly the public-private partnership that we did with Seymour Street. But this is zoning, so it's really, it's not, you don't have the same level of review and the flexibility and the hands-on relationship that you do with redevelopment. So.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that if we did more of it, and if we did create more, like in Wellmont, the public parking is really in the new Midtown lot, right?
Now we have 60 spaces in the other two.
60 spaces. Okay, well, how about this? Okay, to the extent that we've done it successfully, why not mandate developers that want to use this conversion, force them to prove that they have a parking plan? They may not have the parking plan in place. So if they can rehab their building and say, no, listen, I've got commitments to park these offices here. And that way, you can accomplish both the rehab of the building and that you've got secured parking. Anyway, just my thought. I'm just concerned that by putting this kind of residential parking standard into downtown, we'll lose some of the magic that we have.
Look, I don't want this to sound like we're suddenly putting the brakes on all development, or that everybody's going to have to always have exactly the number of parking spaces called for in the regular plan. I think we need to be flexible. All I'm saying is, I just got to this place, and one of the first things that I was presented with was this, take it, you have nothing to say about it problem on Gates Avenue. And I, for one, never want to see another application like that again, where we have no choice but to swallow something that we really didn't want to swallow. So there's plenty of room, Tony, for us to agree on exactly what you're proposing, which is developers coming and saying, we can't do exactly this. We have this plan. It's good enough. Please bless it. And I'll be the first one to raise my hand, but I don't want to do Gates Avenue again. Thank you very much.
Well, I agree with you on that. I think that's very well taken. So if the ordinance said something like, you can do the 15%, you can change the use, you don't have to provide the parking on site, but you have to prove that parking is not going to create a detrimental effect on downtown. If there could be some mandate for parking that's not necessarily on site, it may be less impactful. So I guess what I'm saying is that maybe to this ordinance, instead of just striking it, put some requirement in that still is quite a hurdle for the developer to achieve. In other words, if you want to do this, you better prove that you're not going to litter the streets with parking, that you've got a plan for your parking, at least.
I think that's what the ordinance does.
Aren't they doing a better job by leaving that to the planning board's discretion, as opposed to giving another goalpost that we might not want to let them hit?
And doesn't this, the way that the ordinance is now edited, still allow the developer to come in and say, hey, I've got to park these cars. Here's where I'm going to park them. Is this good enough, planning board?
I guess you're just not giving prior acknowledgement that, it would be an acceptable solution if it were proven out to be okay. So if it's not mentioned, then I think that's but yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think that's, I see where you guys are coming from. All right, I've said enough. I just want to get my point out that I'm just a little bit worried.
And I'll throw it out there. I'm sure we'll be revisiting this again because, the parking situation seems to change every couple of years, and then we'll go back and make some slight changes to the ordinance, and we can always make changes in the future to see how things happen and what happens in the next coming years.
Laws always have to evolve.
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Who gave the motion on this? I don't think I have that.
I did, and I believe Jeff seconded.
Oh, okay.
I did loudly.
Okay. Okay. All right, let me do the roll call. Vice Chair Brodock,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Mr. Ian Wally,
No.
Ms. Lockman.
Yes.
Counselor Schlager, I think you want to abstain again, right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
And I'm sure Mayor Spiller, you'll be abstaining as well.
I will.
Chair Nguyen
Yes.
and Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I will prepare a report summarizing the board's comments back to the council. And the next item on our agenda, unless anybody, we have committee reports. I don't have anything to report from the committee. I do note that there has been another redevelopment. I believe that there's for tomorrow night's council meeting, there'll be another, I think it's tomorrow night. Maybe it was there's another redevelopment report or request coming from the council for the planning board to study some properties for designation as an area in need of redevelopment over by Walnut Street. So that's a heads up. That's not an area in need of rehabilitation. That's an area in need of redevelopment. We'll be talking about that
And
in
where
the
is
near
that,
future.
Janice? Where is that, Janice? Is that the old opposite the bus station? I live on Walnut Street. I'm curious.
No, it's the industrial area over by where Richard Ciceri's used to be.
Okay, is someone
Yeah.
finally doing something with that?
I believe there's an interested party in redeveloping that piece. So we'll be taking a look at that. And as you know, there's discussions out there with Lackawanna, although I haven't heard exactly where the developer is with his current plans with Lackawanna, but I know he's working on it. So we have a lot of work that's going to be coming up later this year. And that's all I have to report. Mr. Gilmer, as you know, resigned from the board. This is an important thing. So I'm looking for some people, somebody that represent people to sit on his committees. One is the revisions committee, the redevelopment subcommittee, and the master plan subcommittee. Those are the three committees that Mr. Gilmer sat on. Unfortunately,
I didn't know he resigned.
No, neither did I.
he and his wife are moving out of Montclair. I know he was a great asset to the board, but he sent a letter out to the chair and vice chair and myself saying that they are resigning because they're moving out of town. And so he won't be back to any more meetings because I believe that they're closing on their house this month.
Oh, okay.
That's too bad. That's a real
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah,
And she's on the zoning board too, right?
exactly. Yes, she is. So keep in mind the busiest board committee that I know Mr. Gilmer was involved in was the revisions committee. So if there's anybody who's interested in sitting on the revisions committee and the redevelopment committee, because the redevelopment committee is going to be busy as well. So think about it. You don't have to let me know right now. If anybody wants to volunteer, I can raise it at the next meeting.
Who's on them already?
The revisions committee is John and Jeff. The redevelopment subcommittee is Carmel and Keith. And the master plan subcommittee is Carol and Mike Graham. So we usually try to keep 3 members on each subcommittee, so there's openings on all 3.
So we'll mention what we're interested in next meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can send this out again at the next meeting. I think I spoke at the last meeting that we also lost Graham Petto, who took a job in the private sector. He's now working for Topology planning firm. So we have some staff shortages in the planning office, and it's a little crazy right now, so I'll try and get information, which is why the minutes were delayed, so I'll try and get things to you as quickly as possible.
Okay,
Alright.
that takes us to our bills, right?
Yes? Is there a
Yeah,
motion?
Well, let me just explain a couple things for the board, and then I'll make a motion about the bills. Janice, you haven't heard anything more about SCE's invoices, have you?
All I know is the CFO said that they should not be charging interest. There's nothing in that on their bills. If the bills are not paid within 30, what they do is they're charging interest if they're not paid within 30 days. And it doesn't get paid within 30 days because it's just the process that our approvals go through. It takes longer than that to get them paid, to actually get a check cut and sent out.
Right. So for the rest of the board, that's as I was going through the bills this week, I noticed that they started charging interest, and I haven't seen that before. And that's Suburban Consulting. That's our board engineer. And so I had a question about that, whether that was allowed, whether that's something that, the township would allow, whether the contract allows it. And so Janice reached out to the CFO and I think, I assume the township attorney.
I
rather than Mr.
copied both
Neese.
of them, yeah.
Okay. About that issue. So I guess we'll look into that, but I would recommend holding off on approving Suburban's invoices at this point, at least as far as the interest charges go. The rest of the bills seem fine, but if it's easier, Janice, to only approve bills in full and not a partial approval, then what's easiest and kind of allowed?
I think what we should do is, I'll pull the ones where there's an interest charge, okay?
Okay.
And I know that there's a couple that I noticed where there's an I'll just pull those and I'll reach out to them and ask them to waive those fees. And then if they say that, then I'll put it back onto the board, bring it back to the board for approval. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So I would move to approve all the bills except for SCE bills that contain interest charges.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay.
I would report that I'm not getting any ideas, okay?
Wise man.
We look out for those things.
Okay.
All right, everyone. I think, wow, it's just been an hour well spent. Thank you all.
Absolutely.
And I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
So long, everyone.
everyone. Have a good rest of the evening. And we will
Happy
see you next
holiday.
time.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.